Hey,
Those
bro.
things are ripped. Like, oh my, some of
Yeah,
those
they are.
kangaroos
Yeah.
look so
People,
unbelievably strong.
they can kill you. They can kill you because they're really strong and big, some of them. And if you get in their way, they will attack you because they're huge, some of them.
Yeah, it's scary. I've seen a baby kangaroo and it melted my heart. I was not even at a petting zoo. This is so weird. I was at my gym and no, I was at my gym and somebody brought in a baby kangaroo with a diaper and everything and was hopping around and literally my heart melted. I'm like, this is the cutest thing. I want a baby kangaroo so bad. And then I was like looking at videos on kangaroos and I was like, no, I don't want a kangaroo.
No, it's going to grow up and murder somebody.
Yeah, no.
Don't you scratch my window. Oi!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies, where I'm on vacation right now. I've enjoyed a week off of work and allowing my mind to reset in this crazy world that we live in. It's very much necessary, in my opinion. But anyways, enough about me. We have the pleasure of bringing Neha back on from Nova Empower, psychotherapist. Am I correct in saying that, for the Federation of Australia? Welcome back, girl. What's up?
I'm a psychotherapist with the with PACWA, which is the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia. Okay. You've confused me too. So thank you for having me again.
Rock on. Well, welcome again back to Talk Junkies. We with in light of everything that's going on right now, I think that we could try and shed a little bit of light on it from your perspective, being in the mental health game. Just one of the things that I was curious about, and that's just been on my mind, is just, and I think we kind of mentioned it in the last podcast, but just maybe just harp on it a little bit more, is just, what do you think the impacts are, mental health-wise, on a lockdown of this magnitude? I mean, we're talking about the whole world for the most part that's on lockdown. There was a point in time here in the U.S. where you literally could only go to the grocery store and get takeout food. That was it. And I'm just curious, is there even enough evidence or studies to say what the mental health impacts of that is?
Well, at this stage, because it's still current and it's still happening, it's really difficult to have all the analytical data or research data to say exactly how this has affected people's lives. But in general, it's affected everybody's lives. The pandemic has affected people's lives in terms of, their work schedules, including how and where people work, whether they've lost their finances, whether they've lost their homes. They've got mortgages out on their homes, whether they're in a place to pay that off, and that's affected their families, their kids. I mean, there's huge impacts of, people have lost their jobs, all sorts of issues that are kind of going along with just the pandemic, along with the health implications. Of course, people have lost loved ones. People have lost, their social ability to socialize with other people. So there's been losses on so many levels in terms of the pandemic. It's not just one thing that we're kind of looking at. We're looking at, a spectrum of things that have occurred as a result of all of this, and the mental health impacts of those on individuals, on societies, has been huge. So, in Australia, like I was saying, things are kind of quite good in terms of the way that the government has handled it, and we've got social supports from the government, but obviously that's not happened all over the world. It's different in different countries, and people haven't been able to have that social support or the economic support from governments. And I imagine that in the US, it's been a very different story in terms of, because over here in Australia, we've got Medicare, which is, the government covers your medical costs, but in the US, it's not like that. So in terms of people getting sick and trying to afford healthcare costs, that's a huge impact in and of itself as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a complete huge loss in many ways as a society, as an individual, to everybody in some way.
So another thing to tie into that, Is there any in this, there could have been studies on this before, and I'm not trying to be a proponent and say that masks don't work, because I think that they do work, and it does stop, it does stop what it's supposed to stop. But isn't that a way of communication, and that could also affect the mental health whenever we're all wearing masks constantly and we're trying to interact with each other, we can't see each other's expressions and really get in tune to who that person is or what they're about, because now everyone's wearing a mask.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, my thoughts on a mask is that as much as it's important to control, I mean, there's new evidence that is coming out every day. Now in Australia, they're saying, at first they said that it was there was no need to wear masks, that was the health advice of all health officials in Australia, that you don't need to wear a mask, you just need to maintain social distancing of the 1.5 meters. And now they've come out and said they think that new research is suggesting that it's a useful way of controlling the spread of the virus, and that they are going to make the use of wearing masks mandatory, especially in Melbourne, where coronavirus is spreading quite rapidly amongst, there's community transmission, so it's spreading rapidly, and it's a good idea for people to wear masks. So I mean, there's mixed evidence on this, right? Sometimes they're saying that they don't know enough whether that's going to serve the purpose, but then they're saying if you wear a mask, right, and you keep taking it on and off, then you're contaminating the mask. So you're still not in a position to be able to say, okay, this is 100% guarantee that it's going to work. So I suppose then it comes down to, yes, you're right, how do I interact with people that are wearing masks? And then everyone's thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get sick, so I put a mask on too. And we're not able to, again, that impacts the way people interact with each other as well, when you can't be physically close. And when you can't be physically close, you're talking from a distance as it is. And then you're wearing masks on top of that as well, where the evidence is mixed. Should I, shouldn't I? So, I mean, what do you do with that? That's my personal opinion. I haven't worn a mask, but I have nothing against people that are wearing one, because I do think that in certain ways, I mean, whatever the health advice is, because I'm not a doctor, so I don't really know, or an infectious disease expert to say whether you should or you shouldn't. But I do think that, obviously seeing people walking around personally with masks on, yes, you're right, I can't see their face. I can't see anything about them, what they feel, how they interact, whether they're laughing, whether they're crying. There's nothing that I can tell with an expression on their face. So, yeah, that obviously has an impact on how people feel as well.
Do you think, because here in, especially because we're like Bible Belt, very much like the very center of the United States where we are, I've noticed that there's a lot of people who are super anti-mask and will almost be upset about it, and people that are super for it. Is it that divided in Australia too, or is everybody kind of on the same page? Because it's very divided right now in the US.
Yeah, it's divided here too. There's
that makes me feel better, by the way.
Yeah. There are people walking around with masks, and there are people that aren't. So, I mean, but the spread here is not as much as it is in the US, and that's what kind of I was trying to get at, that there aren't that many people that have the virus here. So they don't think, I mean, I personally don't think that I need to go out and wear a mask, but there are people that are walking around with masks. So, I mean, that's a personal choice here now. It's not a mandatory thing, whereas I think in the US, it's more a mandatory thing.
There are some states or counties, cities, whatever, that have made it mandatory. Kansas, our next door neighbor state, it is mandatory everywhere. Like, if you're out in public at all, you have to wear a mask. If you go into a restaurant to eat, you have to have a mask on until you have a beverage or food sitting in front of you. Until you have something to consume in front of you, your mask has to be on. In the
yeah,
episode,
and that's the thing, right? And then you're going to take it off to eat, but then the virus can still get onto the mask if you touch it and you keep taking it off and you keep putting it on, so it gets contaminated. And that's potentially, they said, like I was watching an infectious disease specialist speaking on this yesterday on the news, that if you keep doing that, you are contaminating the mask as well. So what's the safety in that?
It's just I just hate seeing people so divided. Like, I know it's always been, but I think through this particular incident that's happened with the epidemic worldwide, is you really see the division between people. Like there isn't too much common ground. It's like just two sides of people just gnawing at each other, calling people idiots, and it's just very frustrating for me. I just want to see people just be people, and like get along a little bit. But this has almost shown, in my opinion, just how divided humanity is. Like they're literally everybody's chosen a side. Everybody thinks the other side is stupid, and their opinions are whack, whatever. But it's just frustrating. The times that have happened since the beginning of 2020 have just been really frustrating and dismal. And I think it should be dismal for whatever side that that you're on, or what your opinions are, because it's just, man, humanity is literally like split down the line of, at least in America, just arguing with each other, and no result can come from something like that.
I feel like we've been like that, though, always, or at least as long as I've been alive and as long as I can remember. The only difference is we've added another bullet point to that now with the mask, as to where you had people argue about gun rights, gay marriage, red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican, all this different stuff that people have always been divided, at least in the United States. I'm assuming worldwide, but for sure in the United States, because that's what I know about. People have always been divided. With the mask thing, you've just added on another division point, just another argument to take place. You have, we've got people where we work that they'll come in and they're super against it, and it's like, it's this, my way or the highway, and they're like, this is all garbage. And then you've got people on the opposite end who are like, they're offended seeing someone without a mask. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like that's just how people are, and we've just added another point to that.
I think it's a lack of just somebody being accepting of somebody else's opinion that's different than you. And you can also just realize that you're a flawed human being too. And like, even though I have very definite opinions on certain things, but just because somebody has the opposite of me doesn't mean that I just need to be snarling in their face about some things. And I don't, times like this just bring out a lot of the worst.
You're just talking about humanity in general.
I know, humanity. Right.
So as I hear, like, both of you, there's frustrations, right? Like you mentioned that there's a frustration that you're feeling on an individual level with how society is at large. And this is kind of like a frustration that is being felt on a collective level by each individual on some level, right? So, and we haven't had to go through a pandemic before. No one's had to do this before, not in my lifetime. I don't know about yours, but I don't think in yours either. So none of us have gone through. How old do you think we are? Damn. So not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime. So it's not something that anyone's gone through. It's not something that you've experienced. And anything on this level, right, that requires a collective consciousness kind of thing, is unsettling, is frustrating, is uncomfortable, is unknown, right? And this is something that we don't know. What is it bringing? So everyone's got an opinion on it. And of course, you're going to feel a sense of frustration. Well, I don't agree with that. And you don't have to agree with it. And that's the point. And that's why there's all these riots and there's protests, and everyone's getting to that point of having enough on top of all the stress that you already got in life as it is. So it's not an easy situation to go through for anybody. And I don't think everyone's got their own personal challenges, and then you have a collective challenge of a pandemic. So you throw that on to everyone, and then you've got the financial challenges of lockdowns, and it just expands on that level. So, yeah, I totally understand.
Have you seen an increase in no, you're good. Have you seen an increase of patients since all this has happened?
Yes. And I was kind of talking to one of my colleagues about this, that I have seen an increase in the people that are coming to me and the magnitude of the issues that they're coming with. So, I mean, one of the top ones that I can tell you right now, and it's been sitting with me for a few months now, is the whole suicide issue. So a lot of patients coming to me with suicidal ideations, or they've had someone who has committed suicide that they know, right? Whether it's a close member of their family or whether it's a friend or whatever it is. So, and that's been heavy. It's been very heavy. So, and it is, I mean, there has been concern for a potential spike in suicides all over the world, which has been exacerbated by these, by the social isolation and the quarantine measures and the social distancing measures the fear of the pandemic, the unemployment, the financial instability, and the list goes on. Relationship issues, domestic violence issues. So everything has expanded, exponentially with the pandemic. So whatever issues were existing, they just got out of control.
No, here in Kansas City, I was amazed to learn this, but just a couple weeks ago, we broke the murder record for Kansas City, and we're only halfway through the year.
Oh, like the yearly.
Yeah, like yearly. Yeah, like we've literally already broken the record, and there's still 6 more months left in Kansas City as far as violent homicides go. It's just the world's just dismal right now. But to put that in, like, I understand exactly what you're saying. Just like hearing that number, like it's just I
was gonna say, thinking about everything that you said, it makes complete sense that the rates would be up of not only suicide, but people coming in for mental health issues or wanting to get help because, like you mentioned, with financial instability, relationships, and all this, and it all falls back to, I feel like as people, there's 2 things that you really, really need, and that's you need social interaction. Even if you're an introvert and you're a super loner, you still have forms of social interaction. You go with your close-knit group of 2 other friends or whatever, but social interaction, and then financial stability, which financial stability leads into, like, relationships and everything else. Like, I think it's 80% of divorces are caused by financial issues. So now you talk about people being jobless and not being able to, like, they can't socialize, they don't have jobs, they don't know what they're going to do about money because everybody's freaking out about it. So that causes relationship issues. No, it all makes complete sense. I don't see how there wouldn't be a rise in people coming in for mental issues.
I think just from you saying that, real quick, is that so many people don't realize how everybody's intertwined. Like, everybody on this planet right now is completely intertwined. You have an effect on everything else, how you do your day-to-day life, holding doors open for people. I talk about that all the time, like putting a smile on your face, being nice to somebody, and seeing somebody get bullied, stand up for them, like just stuff like that. Just to think that you're alone in this world is not the case. Like, you see it through numbers. Like, everybody's intertwined. Like, we're all in this together, and we need to like work through it together too. But that's just my little piece on it real quick.
But it's really hard when you've got people all over the world that aren't agreeing on one thing, right? Like you said, it's all divided. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone thinks that their opinion is the right opinion, and it's okay to have an opinion because you are entitled to have an opinion. Whether it's right or wrong for you, that's up to you. But people are quick to make judgments on how each individual is feeling. And the idea is not to make judgments about how you feel, but it's just to sit with these uncomfortable feelings and to get through it. So the only way through the challenge is to move through it rather than against it. So it's a difficult balance to walk, like I said, in relation to how people are feeling on an individual level. Everyone's had a different experience of it on an individual level. But as a collective, there is a loss of some kind in everybody's life. And it's the loss that causes grief, anger, frustration, all sorts of things that you feel. They are being caused by all of the heaviness of what is going on.
So what do you see the end result being? I mean, with everything that we talked about, I'm not saying that you know the true answer, but just your opinion on how we're going to come out of this as a society in our mental health. I mean, with all the damage that it's caused right now, and this is just my opinion, I think it's caused more than the actual virus itself. But again, maybe the lockdowns are necessary, maybe that stopped the spread of the virus, but just everything that's happening that's terrible. The amount of people committing suicide, the amount of people getting divorced due to financial issues because of this. I mean, what do you think the end result of mental health is going to be when this pandemic is finally over and all the riots? And I don't know if riots are happening in Australia or not, but
it's difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen in the lives of people once the pandemic is over, because it's already got whatever's going on is already having impacts, right? So it's not something that's going to happen after. It's already happened. So it's about how do you move through that. And as an individual, everyone needs to be supported through this time. And just on a personal level as well, when you're socially distancing, when you can't see your friends, when you can't socialize, we're all social beings, right? We need other people. We need to communicate. We need to be there to be around people. So no human being can survive in isolation. And that's what we are being asked to do at this point, and it's already had those impacts. And that's why you've had all these issues. So it's not like there is a way forward after the pandemic is over. The pandemic is existent and it's already having all these impacts. It's already had these impacts. Not that it's already had it, and people are going through it already. So the aftermath is already happening. It's not like this is something that's in isolation, that it will happen when this occurs. So when this is finished, we don't know. We don't have a definitive date of when it's going to finish. No one knows that. Or whether we'll have a vaccine for it, or whether there's going to be a cure for it, whatever. That's an unknown factor at this stage. So in terms of what happens after, like, I don't know what happens after, but I know what's happening right now is already the aftermath of it. So, and people are feeling it. So in all aspects of it. So, and what happens on an economic level now, what happens on a global level, what happens on all those levels, is also going to be another big challenge to kind of overcome. And that's going to have some far-reaching implications too.
That's a really good way to put it. I never even thought about that. You saying that the aftermath has already happened, like everything is already happening right now. It doesn't really change down the line. And I mean, I've even noticed that, like, I didn't really notice it until you just pointed it out, but I can think of perfect examples of that already. And Jesse, this probably fits for you as well. We have like a core like friend group of like 8 or 9 of us that we would used to regularly hang out, like go to the bar, go do something like pretty often, like once every 2 weeks kind of thing. We'd go be social, and there'd be a big group of anywhere between 4 to 10 of us, And so we had this like lockdown for like a month and a half where we really weren't leaving our houses or doing anything. And now stuff is at least partially reopened. And I don't think any of us have really been in the mental, like it changed things. Like we haven't been in the mental state to like, stuff is reopened, but we haven't went and hung out like a group of 8 to 10 of us, like going to the bar or doing anything, even though stuff is reopened. It's like, it's not back to normal yet, or the change has already like taken place. It's weird.
And what is the new normal? What is the new normal? The new normal is to be distant from each other with a 1.5 meter distancing, the social, like all these, even if you go to a restaurant, everyone's sitting so far apart. You can't stand close to somebody. You can't hug people. So there's restrictions on how social you can be, even though you can be social. But there's restrictions on how social you can be. And, if you can't get a hug from someone, if you can't go, be close to them, if you can't take a photo with them, if you can't touch them, all of these things have an impact on your mental health, right? Like you said, you can still do that partially, but you can't really be the same. And nothing can be the same, even though you are in the midst of this and things have opened, and yes, you can go out, and yes, you can go to the beach, you can do all of this, but you still can't be what you used to be. Mm-hmm. So there's the freedom of that has been taken away because there's a fear element in there. So because people are scared of catching the virus, people are scared of all sorts of things now. Even if the virus doesn't exist, you still got to maintain the distance. Yeah, so what do you do with that?
It's like uncertainty causes so much fear, right? But especially when it shines so bright, like in 2020, how it's been. Uncertainty is just in everybody's face about how everything's going to be after this and the state of everybody's going to be. But isn't that it's almost kind of ironic because that's just life in general. It's uncertain and change is inevitable. Change is the one thing that's guaranteed. Nothing will ever stay the same. Things will constantly change, but it's the one thing we fear so heavily. Like,
in all fairness, this has been a bigger change than what usually happens.
That's true. That's absolutely true. But it's just one thing that's guaranteed in life is that things will not stay the same. They will constantly progress, whether negative or positive, but it will change. And I don't know. I think people need to be more maybe more understanding of change, the fact that it's inevitable, and be more in the moment. And you can make your decisions here in this moment and not think so much far into the future, even though I have that problem. I have a little bit of anxiety about the future too. But it's better to get in the moment that you're in right now and go, okay, like I can control this. I can control how I react to certain things. But
And that's a great point there. Like, you can only control this moment. What happens in the next moment, you cannot control. And these things are beyond everybody's control. You know, no one came here saying that I'm going to control the pandemic and I'm going to control the social distancing and I'm going to control the financial aspect. And no one can control that. All those things are out of everybody's control. So what you can control is, yes, your reaction. So when there is a time between the stimulus and the response time, your reaction is what you can control. So that's an important thing to hold, and it's good that you've kind of highlighted that, because that's the only way that you can feel like there's some type of control in my life of something, and the only thing that you can control is your response to what is occurring around you.
And I think that's also what makes life beautiful too, at the fact that you don't know. And it can be this horrible anxiety, or it can be this beautiful thing depending on your perspective or the moment that you're in. But it's also what makes humans great, is the fact that we don't know the future and that we are flawed and that we can develop. And that's what, in my opinion, that's what makes life fun, is at the same time, is because you don't know, and it's exciting. If we knew the future and how everything was going to be, we knew all the steps from, man, this is when I'm born, this is when I die, it'd be boring. It'd be boring on the other side, like knowing it all. It's the discovery that's exciting too. But
you're on some real philosophical stuff today, man.
Man, I love
I feel like
philosophy.
you're about to like start writing haikus or some shit today.
I think you should be the one giving the advice.
Yeah.
That would be something.
I have an unrelated question real quick. I mean, it's related to the COVID thing, but not so much mental health. Just out of curiosity, did they in Australia do any kind of like government aid for people? Was there any like stimulus package from the government, unemployment kind of situation change? I was just, because I know what happened in the United States. I just didn't know if anything happened in Australia.
It's actually an ongoing thing that they're doing in Australia. So everybody, all the pensioners and everybody got a stimulus package, and then there was then people had job seeker and job keeper payments that they got as well, which went on for 6 months, and now they're looking at extending that. So everyone that became unemployed could go on one of those two payments if you were eligible for them. And they were like a good amount. I mean, it wasn't huge, but it was something to get you by, to be able to survive and to pay your rents and things like that. So yes, the government has stepped in and done a lot in Australia for people to get through it, to give them a stimulus package, and the pensioners and everybody. Yeah.
I was just curious. I assumed, but it's just good to know, you know.
And Australia's got a pretty solid healthcare system. So everyone's, you know, all the citizens here have a Medicare situation where the government pays for your medical bills. So yeah, so in terms of that, like, the government's pretty strong here to support people through this. So we haven't felt the, I suppose, on such a large level as possibly the US, where people have actually become homeless. They haven't been able to afford, you know, they literally have lost everything.
I've always thought Australia sounded cool, and I would like, I mean, man, it'd be super dope to live there, except for the fact that you guys have spiders that like kill you by looking at you.
I was about to talk about the spiders. The spiders.
You guys got like spiders and
scorpions
scorpion stuff that if you just look at them wrong, you die.
Which one would you rather, die by being in Australia by a spider, or being in the US and with all of the stuff that's going on over there?
Good question.
I don't know.
Australia is beautiful, man. We don't have much to look at in Missouri. I've seen some video of Australia. It seems like beautiful.
But it just depends where you live.
Land.
You could move to Colorado. There's, you know,
That's
I mean, there's tons of different whatever. I don't know. Spiders freak me out. I ain't about that. Kangaroos are cool. I don't have a problem with snakes. Just
Dude,
spiders,
kangaroos will fuck you up too, man.
man. Well, I'm
I've
not
seen
saying
some
that
videos
I'm
of
gonna get
kangaroos.
close to them and be like, hey,
Those
bro.
things are ripped. Like, oh my. Some
Yeah,
of those
they are.
kangaroos
Yeah.
look so unbelievably strong.
They can kill you. They can kill you because they're really strong and big, some of them. And if you get in their way, they will attack you because they're huge, some of them.
Yeah, it's scary. I've seen a baby kangaroo and it melted my heart. I was not even at a petting zoo. This is so weird. I was at my gym. And no, I was at my gym, and somebody brought in a baby kangaroo with a diaper and everything and was hopping around, and literally my heart melted. I'm like, this is the cutest thing. I want a baby kangaroo so bad. And then I was like looking at videos on kangaroos, and I was like, no, I don't want a kangaroo.
No, it's gonna grow up and murder somebody.
Yeah, no.
How big are the spiders? What are they spider? What
I
are
love
they?
how we're onto this now.
No, I've seen it too. I mean, you've had to have seen one, right? The famous spider in Australia.
Yeah, there's lots of spiders here in general. But yeah, I mean, it depends on which one. There's the huntsman one that's huge when I see it on the wall sometimes here. And they're huge. They're like this
Like
big.
in your apartment?
So,
Or in your house? I don't know if you're in an apartment or house. I'm sorry. I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
You've seen them in your house?
yeah.
What do? Do
They're
you call the
huge.
police? Like,
Well, usually you just catch them and put a glass on them and then go and leave them outside. I don't do that because they freak me out, but my partner does that. I don't. Because if I see one, it just freaks me out.
I would need some help too.
Yeah.
Well, going back to it, I think the one thing that I think, and I realized that through the conversation that we were having, I think that the social, it's kind of, in my opinion, it's a social experiment added on top of the pandemic. I think it just kind of goes hand in hand. Again, that's just my opinion. But I think like the restrictions that they have on what we can do with each other, like we just described and all that stuff, I think that that's just going to have a lasting effect on everyone's mental health. And again, you asked the question, what is the new normal, right? And I don't think anyone has the answer to that. And as human beings, we're ready for quick results, and we want it to happen fast and now, and we can't wait, but we're going to have to wait. And I think the longer that we wait, the mental health impact from having these restrictions, it's going to set us back in some way or another. I think that having this conversation made me realize that.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, this is going to change forever, right? Because now you've been doing this for so long that no one has, this is the new normal. And it takes a long time for people to adjust to a new normal. In general, I mean, if you think about it on an individual level, when you do something new, even if it's a new job or it's a new place that you're moving to or whatever it is, something new that you do, it takes a long time for you to adjust to that newness. So this in and of itself is a new normal that we will take time to adjust to, especially with, oh, I can't give you a hug. Oh, I got to maintain the distance. Oh, I got to work from home. Oh, this is uncertain. Now the lockdown can happen at any time. Oh, now I don't have a job. Oh, I've got a little bit of money over here. Just things that we can't control. Like I said, this is out of our control. And that makes people feel really unstable and unsafe. And it is about safety at the end of the day. Everyone wants to feel safe. So if you're not feeling safe in something, it causes implications on many levels in your life.
I was going to ask about, you brought up the whole working from home thing and everything like that. Is that still in your field? Is that what you guys are doing right now? Like, do you do video conferencing with your patients, or are you actually back in the office? Or, because I know that that's an option in your field.
I do both.
Okay.
I do both. So if people want to come and see me at the office, then they come and see me in my clinic. And if they want to do a video conferencing, if they're more comfortable with that, then they do that. But now, because there isn't a spread of the virus here, they're all generally coming to my place of work. So my clinic, yeah.
that has to make your job a little bit more difficult, right? Being able to read body language or even eye contact, because it's not person to person. It's through that. That's got to be a hurdle you have to go through, I would assume, right? To be able to get a better grasp on your patient.
Yes, of course. I mean, there's a huge hurdle in terms of, doing online therapy. It's not that easy. It's not the same as face-to-face. So it is hard. But at the same time, I mean, you've got to do what you have to do. But in the middle, I did have to shift it to an online situation. But now, because restrictions have eased in Australia, in Sydney particularly, people are coming back, and it's okay. It's okay, and it's much better to meet face to face.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And that's, you just said, if this is the new normal, it's just like that weighs heavy on my mind, that this is the new, I mean, like, if it's the new normal for like forever, like you said, if and not even another pandemic, if the flu next year is somehow more powerful than it ever has before, there could be another lockdown. That's crazy that this is the new normal. That's insane. But
from what I said earlier, is that if there's one thing that's guaranteed, is that this will change too. It can't be forever. Nothing is forever. This will change, and adapt.
But
so you can't think that this is the set.
But what I'm saying
This
is
is what it's
the,
gonna be.
the mental health issues that this is causing on people and dividing people, and you're always going to have those people now who are like, stay away from me, stay 6 feet away, like, where's your mask? Like, I don't think that that's going to go away for a long time. I'm saying years, and again, I could be wrong.
It probably will be years, realistically. That's one of the, I can't remember who it was. There was some kind of doctor, and not like medical doctor, but like, whatever, I can't think of the other, they have a doctorate, but they're not a medical doctor. Anyways, that they were doing something, and they were saying that whenever, years from now, whenever the history books write about this, everything that we've experienced, like during the whole pandemic and COVID and everything, will only be the first third of that section of the history book. The other 2/3 are going to be the lasting results of like what happened to the economy, how people are dealing with this 4 years from now, Like literally what we're dealing with is a small part of the overreaching or the overarching like effects.
Yes, definitely. And like I said, it's not something that's going to just go away or what's the aftermath. We're already in the aftermath. So we're just going through it. And what happens further down the track is unpredictable. And you can't predict how people are going to feel about it, what you're going to do about it. You've got to deal with that as it comes. Because we're already dealing with what is coming along with this whole situation that no one's had to deal with before. So
We'll see. We're all in it together. So let's switch gears a little bit. I don't know if you've watched any of our podcasts that we've done throughout the years, but we're pretty heavy on just talking about government and corruption that happens within the government and stuff like that. That's not what I want to talk about. But before the podcast, we had asked you a question, and whatever light you can shed on it, because we're trying to understand how the corporate oligarchy works, or the oligarchy system within human nature works. And if you could give us any feedback, maybe you could word it better, Jesse.
I was about to say you should avoid words like that because that's still a conspiratorial. I might just be making that word up. Like view on things, which we don't want to put Neha in that corner of conspiracy theory.
No,
but just
I'm
the
not.
mental. So basically, to generalize it, just psychological. I mean, I'm trying to think of what I said before the podcast, which was the psychological state of the top 1%, people who are who have so much. Basically, are they considered normal? Is just normal people get there, or is there something definable about them mentally, maybe positive or negative, that brought them to that state to have so much or to be in that position of power? I hope I did my best on that.
And by the way, we didn't prep.
I try to make it not conspiracy theory,
Right, and we didn't-
because I'm sure Neha doesn't want to go down a conspiracy theory route.
Is the mental health and the mental thought process of super powerful people, whether that be people who hold an official office in politics or a CEO of a company, is their mental thought process or health different than the average individual?
There you go.
okay, that's an interesting question, right? Yes, and to a degree, yes, right? Because to achieve that level of success, it doesn't come easy, right? There's obviously drive there, there's passion there, there's motivation there. There's all sorts of those things that are there. There's persistence there, because to get to that 1% is not an easy task. At what cost is another thing. If it's at the cost of human lives, if it's at the cost of whatever that cost is different for each individual. But the super rich, and I suppose before the podcast we were talking about who did you mention that you wanted to know about?
Well, I brought up the really dark subject of the pedophilia rings, which has not been proven in America. But the one thing that was provable was the Jimmy Salva incident that happened in Britain with a lot of like very wealthy individuals, billionaires, and they're not called the Senate. I'm trying to think of what they're called in
Parliament?
Parliament. There you go. Thank you. They were in Parliament. They were involved within the child pedophilia ring, and the tie of the mental state of, is it a problem to have so much drive, and then whenever you get your goal, the drive is still there? to continue on for this need for power? And
Yeah.
is that what kind of caused that, or is it something else? Are they just like sick individuals, or had something happen to them earlier on in their life? Is there any tie to that?
Of course there is. I mean, you don't just do these things for no reason, right? Like, you can't just think that pedophilia is okay and one person just wants to go out and be a pedophile. There's obviously got to be issues that they've gone through in their childhood to be able to think in their mind that this is okay, to do at whatever cost, like I said. So, of course, there is a definite link in people's psychological backgrounds and their upbringings to what motivates them to do these things, whether it's a sociopath, whether it's a narcissist, whether it's, people, a pedophile, or whatever it is, whether it's a serial killer, a murderer. There is a lot of psychological research that supports why people are motivated to do this and what kind of upbringings and backgrounds they've had or how they've suffered, and how that's had an implication, the trauma that's been related to that, how that's had an implication on changing their brain chemistry to be led to be motivated by something on that level. So yes, if you're asking me whether there's a link to that, there definitely is. And research supports that link.
One thing that always made me curious, because a psychopath who is a serial killer and murdered a bunch of people, is in prison, are probably more likely to talk to a mental health expert and disclose, and they are able to analyze them like pretty thoroughly because of the position that they're in. But like the 1% or people in power that get to that level, I could almost see where it'd be difficult to get data on them, because they probably don't want to disclose this information, and they have so much wealth that they're able to like hide behind. I could see there not being very much actual data on them. I could be completely wrong, but I don't, that's another thing that I've thought about, is that they really haven't been psychologically analyzed to a full extent, like, Ted Bundy or, serial killers who are in prison and they honestly feel really good about telling their life story because, I don't know, some odd reason they're into that maybe, but yeah.
I haven't done I haven't done any personal research to find out what the top 1% people that are wealthy and that get into, these kind of pedophilia or whatever it is that whatever they're hiding behind, why they get into what they get into, or how they become that rich. There isn't that much research, but if you're looking at people in prisons or people that have actually been convicted of things like that, whether it's a sexual assault, whether it's a sociopath, whether it's a narcissist, whatever it is, there is research to support that, yes. But there isn't research I don't know whether there is research to support the top 1% of people that are quite wealthy. But you might be right in saying that they are hiding behind their wealth, so it would be harder to get them to disclose that information.
I was curious real quick about the whole... I'm trying to think how to word this. I should have had this planned out a little better ahead of time. This is all just like theory right now, or hypothesis, because I doubt there's any actual research on it. But I want your opinion as a professional. I've always thought that, like, so you take an average Joe who makes $40,000 a year in the U.S. or whatever, and this is such a dark subject, like you mentioned earlier, Jesse. It's like something that nobody wants to talk about, but I feel like it needs to be talked about. So you have pedophiles and rapists and just all this awful stuff that I feel like mostly happens, like what you said, when they're a kid, stuff went wrong in their family, something, they got molested or their parents died young and this caused this and that, and there's obviously something there that happened when they're young that made them this way. As to where I feel like with the super high up powerful people who get into it, in my opinion, it may, and I don't know, that's why I'm asking. In my opinion, it may not be that. It just might be like what you were saying earlier, Jesse, when you've got this enormous drive for power, and that's all you want is power and more and more and more. And you reach the summit, you reach the point of not being able to gain more because you've already got it, you've already won, supposedly, Do they move into the pedophilia and other taboo things like cannibalism or whatever it is, whatever's taboo in the world, do they move into that not because they're into it and not because something happened to them when they were little, but because it's the last frontier, for lack of a better word? Like it's the one thing that they can get away with. Like they're like, I have reached such a level of power. What is something that I can do that's more powerful that I can get away with that other people beneath me would not be able to get away with? And it's so taboo, but I can still do it. Is that any kind of, man, I might be wording that awful, but I'm just curious. Do you think that's
hit it up, Neha. Hit it up. It's a rough question.
I mean, to me, like this is very interesting, right? And it's the reason why everything's got a psychological basis. What motivates people to do something is not something that I can predict unless I know what exactly is going on with them, right? And it's really hard. You need to know what people are motivated by, and that's the essence of what I suppose you're trying to say. Like, is it something that's satisfying them on this level? Is it something taboo that they want to do? What is that satisfying, or what is it that is motivating them to want to do something like that? And for that, you need to have a history of a person's life to know what motivates them. What are their insecurities? What is it that they're hiding from? What is it that they're running towards? What is it, that has happened to them in their life? Well, for me to be able to tell you that. So that's an interesting kind of discussion to have, but also it's a difficult one unless you know what a person's background is. You cannot predict that.
I was going to say, it's probably like an impossible question. It was just always in the back of my mind.
Like you said, that was back in the 90s with the parliament and the government.
Jimmy Savile.
Savile. And then you have Epstein. And again, there hasn't been any like end result for it, but allegedly there's a lot of politicians and rich people that are involved in this. So you have that incident back in the 90s. Now you have this incident with Jeffrey Epstein, who's a billionaire. He's hung out with Barack Obama. He's hung out with Donald Trump. He's hung out with Bill Gates, all these rich people. And again, we're not saying that they were a part of it, but they were on the plane. They did go to the island. So we're just saying it's a trend with these billionaires and these top elite people.
To avoid conspiracy theory at best with Neha, because that's not what this podcast is about.
Right.
With Neha is not about conspiracy theory.
And, I don't fall for conspiracy theories either, because like I said, there is always a reason for people to do what they do. And it would be really unfair to say that, this person is doing this because of this reason, because we don't know what the reason is until we delve into that. So, and why people are motivated to do certain things is not something that we can even know just or kind of make assumptions about, or predict, or have definitive opinions on, because you don't know what a person's history is. I don't know what your individual histories are in your life to be able to say how you react to something is not the way that I would react to it.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I just thought about this. So on like a spectrum, right? Like you have the poorest of the poor. They will go out and do things, even violent acts, to be able to feed themselves or to obtain money for their family or whatever reason. Can it be on the opposite side of the spectrum, to where having so much money can also create problems too? Like from one spectrum, it sounded really good in my head actually whenever I thought about it like 30 seconds ago. Now I'm trying to word it right. But so being on one end of the spectrum can cause problems, and then being on the opposite side of the spectrum can probably also cause immense problems too, to where you have so much money you don't know what to do with, and stuff like that. It's not to bring up money too much, but
yes, of course it does. I mean, both situations are really hard, and they're extremes, right? And extremes are easy because you can go from one extreme to another, but it's about maintaining a balance. And if you can't have a balance in life in anything, it gets more and more difficult to be on either side of extremes. So, of course, having too much money can lead to problems, as much as having no money can lead to problems. They're both very difficult situations to be in. So they both pose different set of challenges in an individual's life. So having too much money can have different types of challenges for another person, and having too less money can have other types of challenges for another person. So both things are difficult for both sides of the spectrum, if that kind of makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, I know it was a weird question. It sounded really good in my head whenever I first thought about it. Like,
we kind of have evidence of that already. We kind of have evidence of that already in the way of like, mental illnesses, whether it be like bipolar or depression or anxiety issues, whatever it may be, can affect anybody. I mean, you have people who are super poor who may be depressed and going through a lot, and they feel like if they were more wealthy and they had more money, it would fix all the issues. But on the other end, I mean, Robin Williams committed suicide, and I'm sure there were people who looked at him and were like, man, I want his life. Like, to be a comedian and to be funny and to have all this money and all this. But, I mean, he was obviously in a dark place and killed himself. And then you have, like, Heath Ledger and a bunch of other people who are abusing drugs and doing all this. And when we look at them, we're like, oh, man, it would be great to be them. The grass is always greener. But I feel like it can affect anybody.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's what I'm saying. It poses different types of challenges on both extremes. So it's not like one extreme is better than the other. It's about, striving for balance and having that balance in your life where, you don't have too little or too much, but you can have a happy balance where, you can maintain that level of normalcy for yourself as well, where you're not just motivated by money and you're not just poor, because it's difficult to live in extremes.
Normalcy. I'm going to use that word sometime.
I'm
all about that word.
Do you think that since the government supports you guys medically so well, as opposed to here in the United States where it's not the case, it's extremely expensive, do you think that goes hand in hand with how a country is mentally, just by having access to people like you, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and if I want to go out and see someone and talk to them about certain things, it doesn't cost me? I mean, I know there's going to be mental issues in every country, but I'm just curious if the government supports and backs the people medically, if that helps with the mental health.
Of course it does. Like over here, you can go on a mental health care plan where you do get 10 free sessions, or you pay a gap or whatever to go see somebody to talk about your issues. And that really helps because, you are supported by the government, and there is, I haven't exactly looked at the suicide rates, but that helps with that situation where people are less likely to go down that path than they would be if you didn't have any kind of support, because then people feel like they don't have a choice. What are they meant to do? And when you take choice away, when people feel like they're stuck and they have no choice in something, that's when things start to get really hard. And I think I see this in individuals when they come to me. They think that they're stuck with no choice. And the important thing is to think that you always have a choice. Even if it's a better of two bad choices, there are choices, and you're not left without a choice in life. And that's the dark places that you go to when you feel stuck and you don't have, anywhere to go. So having that support around you is really important, where you can get help, to speak to someone to highlight that there is choice in life.
And I think that if we had more of those options, that we'd be able to do better when situations like this happen, like pandemics. If we're taught at a younger age on how to deal with mental health issues, because again, whenever I was a kid, it was something that I never even knew until I started really doing the podcast, honestly, and having you on the show. I knew a little bit about it, but just amazing my whole life. I, in a way, lucky that I didn't have to deal with a lot of those issues, but I still have my own issues and stuff like that. But I think it's like Peter Schiff was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said, and Jesse, you kind of mentioned this too, people should have been financially ready for this to happen. Everyone lives paycheck to paycheck. We're never really taught to save money. I think that you can kind of apply it in the same way with mental health. If we were more prepared for this to happen, and if the United States came in and our government tried to help us out more, I think that we could have been better prepared.
So you're wanting basic mental health taught in high schools is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen.
Right.
Like, and that should be a thing. That should be a thing. We're taught so many,
I think that's a great thing, right? We're never taught to take care of ourselves on an emotional level. We're just taught that you got to go to school, you got to study, you got to make something of yourself, You got to earn. You got to have a family someday. You got to, all these expectations that get lined up for us as soon as we're born. Really, we're not really taught it's okay to feel sad. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to talk about that. We're the language that we kind of use with our kids is, that we should just you should just get over it. Just move on. You're stronger than this. You're braver than this. Even little things like when they fall down and they get hurt. Oh, it's okay. You're fine. You're all right. And it's that when it all starts from when you're little, and it's the role of parents, like I said last time as well, to nurture that and to bring that out of a child. And that's how you can change societal views on mental health and how important that is to nurture mental health. Because at the moment we're just into roles of, you're just meant to move on and get on with it. Boys are not meant to cry. Boys are not meant to show their emotions. Boys are just meant to be strong. Girls have a different role to play. So it's the gender inequality as well that plays a part in, how we talk about mental health. Because the rates of suicide are higher amongst men than women, because women talk more about their emotions than men. 90% of my patients are women. That's just telling you how much men talk about their mental health. So, and I'm pretty sure that the numbers are the same, because I know that the suicide rates amongst men are higher, mental health issues amongst men are higher, but men just don't seek out help like women do, because they're not taught to seek out help.
There's a huge, in the culture that we live in, and this is not just the United States, it's everywhere. In the culture we live in, it's a huge stigma. It's a massive stigma that you can't do that.
It's unbelievably frustrating to me to see, like, the idea of masculinity for a lot of people is just being this hard, like, nothing can ever affect me. I'll weather anything, but everybody's suffering. like you're suffering too, just with us, and just like let that shit out. I cry during Disney movies, and I used to hate that. I get super emotional at the end of like Disney, like I cry during movies. I get like super into it. I used to like hate that. Now I'm like, I try to embrace that more. Like that's just me. Like I get super emotional. I should be able to cry a little bit. Like let me fucking cry at the end of Coco. Like the movie's so good. Like let me enjoy it. I don't have to. That I just I never appreciated that. We have people. So I'm a bartender, right? And in February, we have margaritas where we put in a little bit of red dye and make them pink for breast cancer awareness. And there is some October. I'm sorry, where there are some guys that won't drink the margarita they ordered because it's pink. I'm like, are you serious right now? Like it's just a fucking margarita. Like because it's pink, it's now this representation of you being fucking man. I'm like, oh man, I don't no. Don't get me wrong. This is a very small portion of guys, but
kind of vulnerability is not attractive for a man, right? Vulnerability is not attractive for a man. It's the strong character, the masculinity that's attractive for males, and that's not true. Vulnerability is more attractive, I think, in people, to me anyway. That might not be the case for everybody, but vulnerability takes you to places where you wouldn't normally go. It makes you connect with people on a much deeper level than on a superficial level. So it's okay to show vulnerability, and for males especially, because it's all over the world. It's not just here. It's a cultural thing. It's a culture that everybody follows this whole idea of masculine, feminine, and that's really hard to change. But if everybody did a little bit of their part over a period of time through generations, it will change. And now there's talk about mental health, but there's still a long way to go.
I was going to say, in all fairness, I think that us as a society have come a long way in our culture to where it was never talked about before. And now you do see a lot more of it now. You see a lot of, whether it be just random ads on YouTube or just whatever it is, there's still that stigma, but I feel like the stigma is lessening. People are opening up more about their mental health, and it is more okay now than it used to be.
Yeah.
which is a good thing.
That's right.
And I also wanted to backtrack real quick and say props to Australia for actually giving like the whole, you brought up the whole 10 free sessions or whatever that the government will give you or whatever, because that's, we talked about education and everything and our poor health system that we have here in the United States. That's a huge thing. I'm not going to say names, but I know of somebody specifically that like they literally couldn't go get help for something because they couldn't afford it. And I'm like, that's absurd to me that we can't give them something at least a couple of times, you know? I don't know. That's so props to Australia for that.
And
It's great. I mean, it's really good that people can get help because you need to get help when you need it the most. So, and if you're at really low points, it's something that should be available. Something that you have to think about 100 times. I cannot afford this. So, and same goes for physical health as well. So if you were to go to the hospital, for example, in the States, I know that it's really expensive to be able to afford medical bills. So if you get sick, you're basically screwed. So, you know, you've got to work as hard as possible to not get sick. But yeah, I mean, that's something that, you know, countries that have strong healthcare healthcare systems are countries that have been able to fight this pandemic more, I suppose, strongly than countries that don't have that stronger healthcare system. So Australia is one of those countries that does have a pretty strong healthcare system, and with the backing of the government for its citizens.
I was gonna there's a bias here too. We've been trained to not go to the doctor for several. I mean, I'm specifically the other day. You guys both. I don't mind mentioning the name because it doesn't hurt anybody. You guys both know Mary. She was kind of sick. She had to go to the doctor. It literally cost her like $180 or something for them to say, hey, drink water, you'll get better. But the thing is, we already know that. We've all made those jokes before where it's like, if you get sick, it's like, I'm not going to go to the doctor because they're going to charge me $300 and tell me to drink clear fluids. So it's literally a thing here that when you're sick, you avoid the doctor on purpose because it causes a financial strain on you, which is the opposite of how it should be.
Definitely. And that's a scary place to be in general for people, right? I can't go seek medical help when I need it because I'm scared that I won't have the finances to afford it. So that's not a good place to be for anybody. And that in and of itself has implications on your mental health, where you're feeling like, oh, you know, now I'm sick and I can't afford this. So how do you afford therapy in that case and all the other things that you need to support yourself? And it's not surprising that things have escalated to that degree in the US with everything, where, you know, it's really hard for people. It's really hard.
It's got to be even worse for like mental health because people are, they've just adapted to whatever mental state that they're in to where they're like, I've lived with this my whole life, as opposed to, oh, I go and I break my arm. Well, no, I have to go to the hospital, but they don't see that that's just as important as focusing on that too. But you know, they get used to it, and they don't want to go spend the money.
My brother's
the $300 a session to sit down and talk to an individual who can truly help them and literally better their entire life. Because it all for me, it all starts mentally. Like once you're mentally stable, then that shows through physically. Then that, you know, it affects everything. Like that's the starting point, really, is mental health.
Well, the United States and how it is, and now this is a good example. My brother, he's 27 now, and he didn't get diagnosed with autism until he was probably 24. Like literally, our system is in place. We knew there was something wrong with him when it came to the social interactions that he had with people. And, you know, there could have been, my parents could have done a better job to, you know, help him get to a better place, but they weren't in any position because, again, the healthcare system. But it took 24 years, and the high school that he went to just passed him along. That's how it is in the United States. And come to find out, you know, it's autism, like it's like a form of Asperger's. I don't know if I said that right. But it's just like my brother's been set back so long in life because we didn't have the tools in place. Just frustrating.
And that's not just just frustrating, but it's also so upsetting to, live through that for 24 long years, not knowing what's wrong. We know something's wrong, but we don't have the financial ability to find out what's wrong, right? And this shouldn't be the case for any human being. Like, this is a necessity. Medical help is a necessity. Like, if you get sick, you need to go to the doctor, and you shouldn't have to think twice about that, right? So you shouldn't have to think whether I can afford this. This is a necessity. It really is, because it's about survival. So if you get physically sick,
I couldn't imagine where my brother would be right now if he actually had help. It would be amazing for him. That,
Isn't it a crazy thought to think that once you help everyone around you to get in the best mental state, to be as well educated as possible, that they can get without having to get into debt for it, all of a sudden all of society would also benefit from it too, including the individual. Like, you help everyone else, get them the help that they need, get them a really good education. There are so many unaccredited high schools, even in Missouri still. It like blows my mind. Like, we had a president, George W. Bush, that passed a law called No Kid Left Behind, to where it immediately, like, they don't have to.
Terrible.
Yeah, it was awful. Like, I was actually going through. My mom had to pull me out and homeschool me because of how bad education got. It was just like kids weren't retaining information, and they were just like, no, just pass them on, put them into the next grade. And then so many bad things happen from that. Get them the education that they need, how they retain information, get them the mental health, whatever, I'm saying this weird, that they need, and then all of a sudden everything will become better. For me, it's so simple, but this is just my opinion. Like, focus on that first. I talk about education so much and how fucked up education is in America right now. But yeah, I think that should be the fundamentals. Like, I don't understand it any other way.
It's the fundamental. You're right. It's the fundamental. Unless you educate people, how are they meant to know anything, really? And education is something that should be the fundamental of any society, because the more uneducated people are, the more difficult it is to manage a society at large. So yeah, it starts from education. Everything stems from there.
And it's so bad in America. I don't know how it is. I'm assuming it's probably the worst here. But I remember, like, being really good at history and science. I love history. I love science. I'm horrible at math. My grammar is just awful. I can't spell. I think I might be slightly dyslexic. But just failing in this, and they wanted me to focus on all the things that I'm bad at. And I'm like, I'm really good at history. Like, I got the highest score on a final in a history class because I really enjoyed, like, reading about history, and I love science. But all they wanted me to do is focus on the things that I'm bad at. And it's so frustrating. Like, let me just be like, this is what I enjoy. This is how I can help, it's just naturally what I'm good at. Why are you making me so much focus on the things that I'm just not good at? Maybe I'm just not good at it. There are other people in the world that'll do math, and then I'll focus on science or whatever, like, everybody's an interconnected, like, cog that's turning. This just isn't my strong suit. Like, don't make me focus on this. I hated it. Also, girls are a big distraction for me in high school. I blame a lot.
Part of life, man.
But
that's interesting, right? Because if you make someone focus on what they're not good at, it highlights their self-esteem issues, that I'm not good at this, right? So, and that's an interesting point. Like, you need to focus, even in general, as parents as well, you need to focus on what the kid's good at, and how can you help them, right, develop what they're good at, not what they can't do. So, and always focusing on what they can't do as opposed to what they can do really well can have serious damaging effects and ramifications further down the track in your life. So you're right. It all starts somewhere, and it starts with that educational background. And you've got to have those solid foundations to lead a life that feels fulfilling for you on an emotional level carrying forward. So as much as you want to talk about mental health, mental health is not one thing. It's a series of events in your entire lifetime that you are here from the time that you're born. So it has various implications at various levels on all sorts of things in your life. So it's about nurturing things step by step, not just as a whole. Like, okay, now we've reached adulthood and now we've got mental health issues, so now we'll just talk about them. So, and once patterns are formed, once your brain is formed, once everything's occurred at the age of 18 or 20, whatever it is, it becomes really difficult to change that moving forward. It's not impossible, but it becomes very difficult.
No, we literally learn better at a younger age. Sorry, I kind of cut you off there.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just saying that I was just agreeing and saying we literally learn better at a younger age, because eventually you get to that point where you don't develop as much. I also briefly wanted to mention, man, I know we keep straying from mental health, but we were talking about education, and that's really important to me. I think it's important to all three of us, probably all four of us. I remember when I was in school, I was only at the school for a couple of years because we moved around a lot, but the best education that I had ever got, and I brought this up because we always blame the government, and I'd say 90% of the time it is their fault, but there are some times when it's our fault, and I don't think we even realize it. And I brought this up recently with the whole Common Core thing, which I'm not going to get back into that. But so when I was in 5th grade, they did a thing where we were all the same students. We all shared like recess and did all this stuff, ate lunch together, but they divided us up based on basically intelligence. And it was, and they didn't scale it. They didn't have like 1 through 4. It was literally, they named them cyclones, twisters, hurricanes, and tornadoes, so that you wouldn't, feel different, whatever. And they literally put you in different things. And whenever the hurricane group would move to math class, they were all together and would have a different lecture than the twister group might have because of different education levels or different intelligence levels. And it worked so much more effectively because the crazy smart kids would be more challenged and have harder work, so they wouldn't get bored, and they would actually learn something. And vice versa, the kids who weren't as smart would have an easier thing so that they can understand it. Like, it was just better. And then parents literally complained and got rid of it because it was there when I was in 5th grade, and then I ended up moving like 2 years later, so I don't know when it happened, but my sister is 6 years younger than me, and she was still there. By the time she got to 5th grade, they were done with that because parents had complained about their kids being divided and being like, you put my kid in the stupid class, blah, 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 blah. So parents caused them to get rid of a system that actually worked very effectively. So I'm just saying the government's not always to blame. We do this to ourselves sometimes.
Well, they weren't stupid. They just weren't progressive in like math, like what I was saying.
I'm not saying they were. I'm saying parents said that.
I'm defending my child self right now. He's not stupid. He's just not good at math.
Jesse, to reiterate, I didn't say that. I'm saying parents said that.
Yeah.
Parents would say, hey, you put my kid in the lowest tier. That's not cool. Everybody should learn the same. So we caused this issue.
We're Neha, if you want to talk upon that, that's completely fine. But we're getting at the top of the hour. I know you're a busy woman and you got a lot going on in today's age. But if you have the time, I'd like to ask you a question. If these two gentlemen have a question that they'd like to ask you as well, if you have the time for that, and then just any lasting thoughts that you might have about the podcast tonight. So
yeah, I'm happy to answer whatever questions you've got.
Cool. My question is, do you believe in karma?
Very strongly. Personally, yes, I do. I'm a Hindu by religion, so and I'm Indian, so I do believe in karma, and I live my life by that. So I believe in what goes around comes around. So yeah, I definitely do.
You and Jesse would get along well.
No, I didn't, like, obviously I'd heard of karma before. This is a weird story, but I did some psychedelics one time, and I felt this interconnection between everybody, and that's really resonated with me throughout the rest of my life, is this feeling of interconnectedness, which it was super intense back then, but I've always kind of carried it with me, and that's kind of where I get that too, is that do help the people around you. Like, if you want to be happy, help, which this might be Hindu, I don't know, but help bring happiness to others, and you'll end up being happy. It's not so much focused on you. It's about what you can do for others. And I thoroughly believe in that. I think the world would be a better place if people had that mentality. So I 100% agree on that.
And adding to that, Jesse, like, it's a great point. Yes, when you are in spaces where you feel, like life is not working out for you, it's good to shift the focus and do something for other people and to shift the focus to service. And that will make you feel better about you and about where you're at. So shifting the focus onto somebody else and helping somebody else with what's going on for them definitely gives you a different perspective on how you feel. So that's a really interesting point. You're right about that. So, and I personally believe that as well, and I live by that too. And the work that I do kind of involves doing that anyway. So, and it puts things in perspective for you as well.
I need to do a better job about it. I need to do a better job about it, but I thoroughly believe in
What's
it.
your question, Saul?
Oh man, I had to have a question?
Yeah, do it.
Shit. Oh man, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to pass on my question. I was too wrapped up in that. For a second.
I wasn't ready for that, Paul. I didn't have a question
no.
lined up.
Yeah, Paul didn't
Okay,
let us know
hold
that
on.
we had to come up with like ending questions.
So if
by
they
the
don't-
way.
if they
Paul's
don't-
throwing us under the bus.
If they don't have any lasting questions, they both said that you probably wouldn't know who this person is. Are you a fan of Jordan Peterson? And
Oh, dude, that was like 3 weeks ago. Whenever we talked about that.
you don't know
To
who
tell
it
you
is?
the truth. No.
You guys were right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what we said. We were like, there's no way Neha's gonna know who that is. He's is he a clinical psychologist out of Canada, out of Canada, and he's very on some opposite side mentalities that a lot of colleges go on. So he's not as liberal, but he's a very interesting individual. He's just
And what interests you about him, Paul?
Just his ideas. And I'm not saying I agree with everything that he says, but just the way that he puts things into perspective. It's just a way I've never heard it before, and it's very interesting. And he has a lot of societal views on what's shaped us as society today, and I find those very interesting.
It's kind of the fact that he goes against the grain a little bit with his views as far as colleges being much more liberal in their thought process, and he goes against the grain. Basically, I don't know.
You check him out, and then next time, just let us know what you think about him.
I'm gonna say no offense, but you guys did not do it because I barely know who he is, and I know who he is, but I've never watched anything about him, and I still don't know anything about him for what you guys just said.
Well, I'll definitely watch him next time now that you've mentioned him, and I'll see what I think about it too. I mean, it's interesting. I love watching different viewpoints on things, but if someone has a different perspective, that's even better. So, yeah, and life is about perspective, and if someone has a different perspective on something, that's great. So I like embracing different perspectives. So I'll definitely check out who he is.
Awesome. You got any lasting thoughts for the podcast?
Well, how did you guys feel? I mean, I don't know. How did you think the podcast went for you all?
No.
You're such a psychiatrist. I love it. It's how we feel about it. I love it. I thought it went really well. I had a lot of fun with this one. I got to be honest. The first time we did a podcast together, and I mentioned it outside before we actually got a hold of you through Skype, and I was like, man, I hope she's not as intimidating as the first time, because I was like really intimidated by you, like the first time. Like,
I know. Last time because you didn't say that to me while we were talking. That was kind of like the after when you guys were having a chat amongst yourselves. But yeah. Did you find me intimidating this time?
No, not at all. Because I get it. Like you were trying to feel us out a little bit and wanted to make sure that you were in a good space and weren't being screwed over in any way. Like we want Rick Ashley you in some way. It's such a weird reference that I just said. So I get it. But I was like, man, she's intense. For the first, I was a little afraid of you.
I think it's because our podcast style has always been very laid back and very just kind of semi-professional, but also all over the place. And you came in very professional, which makes sense in your. I remember specifically
I'm
the
not
beginning.
professional.
I remember specifically the beginning of the podcast last time. You were talking about how you went through school and moved from India and done all this stuff, very crowning achievements. And we were all like, man, I drink booze once in a while. That's.
Yeah, I get on the internet sometimes. So yeah.
But I can understand what you mean by that, and I kind of enjoy the relaxed way too. But there's part of me that's like that at home, just the same as you guys. But then there's different hats that I do wear in my life, and so yeah, that's what I do. So I can understand where you're coming from in terms of feeling intimidated or feeling like, oh, you're a professional and we're not. But it really isn't. Like, I hope that this chat wasn't as
No, not at
professional.
all. No, this is so much more relaxed because we obviously got to know each other a little bit from the previous one. So I was,
I actually do have a question now. If we're getting ready to wrap this whole thing up. If you couldn't, just judging by what you've said, because I remember in the first podcast, which, by the way, for any viewers out there, if you haven't seen the first one with Neha, you should. It's pretty solid. Anyways, if I remember specifically that you talked about how you pretty much knew this is what you wanted to do. Like, even when you were younger, you knew you wanted to help people. You knew you wanted to. So, if for whatever reason, just hypothetical, if you couldn't do the job that you're doing now, what would you do instead?
I'd still be in some type of a helping role. So whether that would be in nursing or whether that would be in community services so I would shift that to some kind of a helping role if I couldn't do this, which, by the way, I've done all of those things too. Mm-hmm. So I tried everything before I got here. So I'd be teaching yoga, or because that's the side of me too that I do. That's in a helping role as well. So something to do with the helping role, I'd still be there.
No professional wrestling, like jumping from the top rope, dropping elbows on people.
I could be a professional gymnast or a yogi.
There you go.
I wanted to see a whole 180 and be like, no, I think I would can peanuts for a living, like just something completely different.
Okay.
Oh, also, just before we do finish, there is, if any of your viewers in Australia are interested, I am planning to do an Are You OK Day event. I don't know if you guys have heard of Are You OK Day. It's on the 9th of September, and usually it's a day where you embrace, mental health. It's a day of mental health, where asking the question, are you okay, and having a conversation with someone can change someone's life. So I am planning a free group therapy session for about 10 to 12 people, where they can come in and we have a discussion on the Are You Okay, and it will be a group therapy session, an open group therapy session, which I'll be leading. So if anyone's interested in that will be coming up soon on where they can book and how they can book and get into having a free group therapy session with me.
I was going to say, when you have more details on that or have like a link or something, if you email that to Paul, I will add that into the description of this video so that any of you out there who are interested, there is obviously already going to be a link to Nova Empower Counseling and, everything about Neha, but for that specifically, if you email Paul, I will add that.
I will be, I'll pass them on to you and you can add them onto your podcast. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much. It's awesome as always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. And I felt that it was a lot more relaxed than the first time as well. So it was the same.
Yes. We need more people like you in the world, Neha.
Yes,
we appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And happy to come on anytime, whenever you guys are ready next time, if we can work out our schedules. I'll be happy to join you again.
That's fantastic.
Cool.
Well, there you have it, folks. Neha with Nova Empower Counseling. Check her out if you're in Australia and you are in need of some sort of help. No matter what it is, this is the girl to go to right here. She is awesome. She knows her shit, man. So hit her up. Thank you for joining Talk Junkies.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
You guys have a good night, because I know it's nighttime there and it's afternoon time here. So
I always forget
enjoy
about that.
your night.
I don't know why. I always forget about that.
We will.
Thanks.
Thank you, Neha.
Have
a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another great, solid podcast with Neha. Hopefully you learned a lot of interesting stuff about that. We feel like we went in some different places. It's
I mean, we talked about education, talked about a couple of other, it's
pandemic,
all about it.
all the good. Yeah, it was good, and I'm very thankful that we met her somehow, and we look forward to having her on again, and hopefully that you guys all like that. And the best thing that you can do, honestly, to share this message is just to share it and like it, man. Honestly, and I think it could go a long way. And again, like she said, just helping one person is all that really matters. Is just that person who's in need. Whether it be you or a loved one or even one of us, just sitting back and listening to that again, I think that can help a lot of people.
Look out for the people around you and reach out. It's difficult, it's awkward, but yeah, reach out to people if you think that needs to happen. And I think we all have good intuition of timing on stuff like that. But if you feel the need, reach out. But
yeah, and another good thing is you don't have to be in Australia to even talk to her. You know what I'm saying? So like if it's something that you want to do, I don't know how insurance would work with that. In the United States, I doubt that they do cover out of state counseling. Who knows? Or out of country. Either way, what I'm saying is if you had someone needed help and you needed someone to talk to, it doesn't matter where you live because she does video sessions and stuff like that. So. You don't have to live in Australia.
Also, to anybody in the United States, we talked about earlier the financial issues. There are free resources out there, and once again, I will put like 2 of them in the description down below for anybody out there who watched this specifically because they had questions about mental health or maybe they're not having the best time. There are always resources out there, including free ones.
Yes. So again, hit that like button. Hit the
subscribe.
Share this video, man. This is a video that YouTube would not censor Facebook or anything like that. So share it on Facebook, all that good stuff. Hit the like button to all our I can't even talk,
man.
What the
finish
fuck?
it off, Paul, or I'll finish it off. Just get me to the point, man. I just want to say it.
Just get him there.
Woo, man. I don't know what's going on, man. I don't know if I'm tired or what's going on. But hit the like button to all our junkies out there.
Stay fly and ring the bell. Tried to mess it up.
Yeah.
Didn't work.